Thank you so very much. I want to just give a really big thank you to all the organizers of this extraordinary event. And I also want to thank my esteemed colleagues from many parts of the globe and the US. And also thank you to those of you that have presented previously. It's going to make my presentation a little easier. You've set some background. So my title, as he said, is Coming Out in the College Classroom as a Lesbian Queer Identified Professor, Disrupting Heteronormativity to Help Create an Inclusive Classroom. So I want to start by, let me back up here just to say that I'm a professor at St. Catherine University in a graduate program called Holistic Health Studies in St. Paul, Minnesota, in the United States. So I want to start by dedicating my presentation to LGBTQIA2S plus professors everywhere, historically and currently. To those who have gone before, who were fired or never promoted or made tenure for being LGBTQIA2S. To those who can never be out in the classroom because of discrimination and prejudice and internalized oppression. To those who bravely take risks to come out in the classroom, I dedicate this to all of you and us. So I wanted to share quickly what I'm going to be doing in my presentation today as I argue for the importance as one can to come out in the classroom. So I'm going to start with talking about the heteronormative assumption and some of the research that really looks at this oppressive assumption in the culture, which really puts the burden on us as LGBTQIA2S professors to have to decide whether to come out in each and every class we teach. And then I'm going to go on to talk about some of the brief literature review of research studies, both discussing this complexity for faculty and also then the research showing the risks and benefits of coming out that really can help create an inclusive classroom. And then I'm going to weave all of this research with my own story and lived experience of using coming out in the classroom as a pedagogical strategy to create an inclusive classroom, which includes the importance of displaying LGBTQIA2S signs and symbols in my teaching and online learning environment. I want to also be clear that I know that there are, in the United States, there are many oppressive social structures in our dominant culture that faculty have to navigate, such as racism, misogyny, patriarchy. And I'm going to be focusing in this presentation today on looking at the oppressive structures of heteronormativity. So I'm going to jump right in and start with the discussion on the dominant cultural heteronormative assumption. And as other presenters have discussed it already, just to be clear, the default, normal, and correct sexual orientation is heterosexual. And within that there are only two binary genders, male and female. And anything then outside of this heteronormative assumption is considered abnormal. And so, in fact, in the United States, it was only 50 years ago that homosexuality, as it was called at that time, was declassified as a mental disorder. In fact, today, in 39 of the states in the United States, a type of destructive therapy called conversion therapy is still practiced, and it is primarily aimed at minors and young adults to force a change of their sexual or gender identities to change to be heterosexual. So this heteronormative assumption is really powerful. So what it means for us as LGBTQIA2S faculty is that we are automatically assumed to be hers, are forced to participate in a balancing act between being our authentic selves and our academic year at times. You know, this heteronormative assumption and phobia and anti-LGBT are not to come out is a highly reliable. Each faculty has to make a college classroom. Of course, this is more complicated with additional marginalized or those who identify as being people of color, blind, deaf, etc. Because of course, the additional layers of prejudice and discrimination in the society. So despite some of this, there have been worldwide gains in the United States, and of course, losses for people who identify as LGBTQIA2S. So, but despite some of these gains, universities and schools are still places where most professors and teachers feel they have themselves as part of their identity. To a time of right-wing and conservative attacks against LGBTQ rights, because we also see in college schools growing restriction and elimination of diversity and silencing of professors and teachers who educate on this topic, and horrific book bans, and LGBTQIA content is at the top of the list. So in fact, in the early 2000s, there was a nonprofit organization founded to combat some of this negativity called Campus Pride, and it was founded on the mission to create a safer, more inclusive LGBTQIA2S friendly colleges and university campuses. So they developed what they called the worst list of discriminatory colleges and universities. So their recent data in 2023 identified almost 200 colleges and universities in the US that have clearly demonstrated severe, which they called the worst, discriminatory practices and policies against LGBTQIA2S plus people. So because of all these discriminatory policies and practices, I want to turn towards some of the studies. A study of professors in Calgary, Canada, revealed, quote, disclosing a lesbian or queer identity in the classroom is not a routine undertaking. Instead requires a consideration of many variables and risks. So I want to just divert for a moment and weave some of my own lived experience of risks that I had to assess. I started St. Catherine University in 1990 as the department chair, and I knew that the university was founded by a radical order of nuns that was rooted in the mission of social justice. So I felt just a little bit safer in that way, but still what all faculty have to really is assess the LGBTQ climate at any college or university. And then I had to ask myself, do I want to risk losing promotion or tenure or advancement, or worse, being fired as I am coming out? Do I want to risk being stereotyped or ineffective by students, or worse, be the recipient of hostility or bullying or hate messages or harm to my physical safety or even defacement of my office? And do I want to risk negative student evaluations? And anybody in higher education at a college or university know that any kind of advancement or promotion or tenure is really also built on having positive student evaluations. So what I decided after assessing all these risks and my own fierce determination, I concluded the same thing that the study did, that despite the risks and efforts, we as professors agreed on the importance of doing so. Another study, also acknowledging the oppressive force of the culture's heteronormative assumption, also recognized the risk and consequences faculty take to come out. This was a study of a university social work faculty. And what this study found, it indicated that most participants were open regarding their sexual orientation, despite negative possible consequences. Another study of lesbian and queer women professors in Calgary, Canada, also recognizing the enormity of discrimination in policies and practices in universities that have to be considered in the decision of whether we as faculty decide to come out or not. It found, despite negative consequences, disclosing LGBTQ identity in the classroom was important as a pedagogical strategy that can not only be used to both demonstrate genuineness, but also is a practice towards social justice. A final study that I want to just talk about in terms of a quick review of some of the literature was a groundbreaking study in the sense that it focused on students' experience of faculty coming out in the classroom rather than the faculty's experience. So in this large study of 500 biology students in a science, technology, and engineering and math program at a Southwestern university in the United States, it found that the impact of faculty revealing her LGBTQ identity could positively affect all students, not just LGBTQ students, and that sharing this personal information can help instructors build relationships with students. So that ends that part of the quick review of some of the research studies. But I then just want to quickly say, as a professor, I've come out and will continue to come out in all of the classes I teach. And I tried to figure out for this presentation, how many classes over the course of 33 years have I taught? And I figure it's right around 264 classes. And I have used my pedagogical strategies to come out as really part of my overall commitment to creating a safe and inclusive classroom, which is rooted in the intersections of social justice, feminist theory, queer theory, anti-racist practice, and transformative learning. And I have used many strategies over the years of coming out. Sometimes during introductions, I'll directly say I'm a lesbian or queer. And I should say I use both of those words because of a generational difference in how people name themselves. When I came out in the 1970s, calling myself lesbian was an empowering word. And now for the next generation, calling themselves queer is an empowering word. So I've become comfortable and I use both of those terms to describe myself. But what my strategy when I first came out, I knew, because I was the department chair, I knew that I would have to get the support or try to get the support of the academic dean. And so I chose a particular day in the United States, October 11th, which is called National Coming Out Day. And it's a day that we are to come out to one more important person in our life, knowing that with that belief of National Coming Out Day, that coming out is still a very important educational strategy. So I chose my academic dean, and I was so nervous. Again, this was 1990. I was so nervous. And I was so delighted that she met my risk, both by acknowledging the vulnerability and that she felt honored that I chose her as the person to come out on my coming out day. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, one of which many, many faculty in higher education will never have. So I was very, very delighted in her response. And my pedagogical strategies in terms of coming out also include other things, such as paying attention to students' pronoun usage. Just like what I did in the beginning of this presentation, I asked students to identify their gender pronouns when they do introductions, if they're comfortable. And because we know that how a student or any of us present on the outside, and it may not be how we identify. So naming gender pronouns is very important. And I also integrate classroom content beyond the gender binary whenever possible. I also pay attention and awareness of, and to challenge my own binary word usage. Like I would not say, can I please, or welcome to the class, ladies and gentlemen. Instead, I would say, welcome everyone. And another important part of my strategy is the importance of displaying, identifying LGBTQIA2S signs and symbols in my office and in my online environment and classroom. I now am in a completely online graduate program. So these signs and symbols, I just took a few photos here. Like in the center, you'll see this is my pencil and pen holder. I have a progressive pride flag sticker, which says everyone is welcome here. And I have the same thing on my laptops. And this picture up in the top right is of my wall, my back wall in the area where I teach online, and it also includes the progressive flag. And this is called the progressive flag because it includes the traditional colors of the pride flag, and then it includes, black and brown to include people of color, and then on the top is the trans flag to be inclusive of that. So displaying signs and symbols is very, very important to me as part of the inclusive classroom. So I'm going to close just by saying again that I've really briefly discussed some of the research and my own personal narrative throughout this presentation to discuss my premise about the importance of coming out to both challenge heteronormativity and to create an inclusive classroom for all. And that will really help to build genuine connection with students. So with that, I will end. I just want to add also, I put in the last two slides here, I put the references from the research on here. So I will end by this and see if there are any questions.